You are the king. But he's more than just a king. He's then going to go on, you are the son of the living God. Now notice this little adjective, living, which is modifying God. It's not just the son of God, the son of the living God. Now that very important word that Peter gives us here in his profession of faith in Christ has great significance and meaning. The geographical significance of this place is Caesarea Philippi. What is Caesarea Philippi? I didn't realize this until I walked in what Jerome calls the fifth gospel, which is the Holy Land. And I remember a trip, one of the trips I took to the Holy Land, and I got a chance to go up to Banyas, which is Caesarea Philippi, and go to this place. And I remember reading, some great authors like Stanley Jockey and others who talked about, there's a great big rock, and it's on that rock where Peter is going to make this profession, and that's where Jesus says, you are rock, and it's over a big cave abyss. And once I got there, I realized that was the whole wrong setting. It's not that there's a great big rock. There's a whole cliff full of all kinds of rocks. There's not one big rock. And then there's a cave, a grotto that was there. But that cave and that grotto isn't like the abyss of Hades. It's just a cave and grotto. And you couldn't see that cave and grotto like you can today back in the first century because there was a gigantic building in front of it. And that building was built by Herod the Great. And it was a temple dedicated to Caesar Augustus. Because Caesar Augustus, when he becomes emperor, after his adopted father Julius is assassinated, and he he defeats and gets vengeance on his father's murderers, right? Brutus and Cassius and the senators. He then goes to the Roman Senate, the ones who are still alive, and he tells them, look, Julius died, now everyone's really sad about that, and let's have a resolution passed in the Senate that Julius was a god. So the Roman senators are rather cynical. They don't think Julius was a god. They thought he was rather a tyrant. But politically, it's politically incorrect to be against Julius at this point in the story. So they say, he's dead. It's not going to hurt us. All right, we decree that he's a god. And then what does Augustus do? Who's the most savvy politician of the ancient Roman world? He says, thank you very much. Guess what that makes me? Divus Filius, son of God. He outmaneuvered the Senate. The Senate never would have decreed Augustus a god who was living. But he outmaneuvered them. He got them to declare Julius, who was dead, a god. And then, for the first time now, officially, the Roman emperors are taking the title God fully. And Augustus takes the title Augustus, which means, in Latin, one worthy of worship. Not a very humble title, right? Or in Greek, Sabastia, which means, again in Greek, one worthy of worship. And so he prints on his coins immediately, Divus Filius, son of God. And then immediately, especially in the East, in present-day Asia Minor, which is Turkey, temples are erected to honor Caesar Augustus and to worship him as a god. And then cities are competing to build temples to him. Now, Herod the Great builds 3 temples dedicated to Caesar Augustus. 3. But he has to be very careful where he puts them. He can't put one in Jerusalem because that'll be a huge riot, and the Jews will go to war. So he builds one way up north, up in what we call Caesarea Philippi, because it's going to be, the city is going to be named after Caesar Augustus with a temple dedicated to him, and it's the Caesarea in the territory of Philip, so it's called Caesarea Philippi, right? That's why it has that name. He builds another one on the coast, northern coast of Israel, and a seaport he builds from scratch called Caesarea Maritima. It'll be from that port, by the way, that Peter and Paul will end up sailing to Rome. And that will be the key port to get in and out of the Holy Land and to the rest of the Roman Empire. And that port he calls Caesarea, named after Caesar Augustus. When you come in the port, one huge platform with a big building on it, and that building was dedicated to Caesar Augustus with a huge statue of Caesar Augustus. And then there was another one in the capital of Samaria where the Samaritans lived. And in that capital of Samaria, which was called Sabastia, which is simply the Greek word for Augustus, there was another temple built for Caesar Augustus. And so you have 3 temples that Herod the Great builds. And why does he do that? Because when there was a civil war, Caesar Augustus was fighting against Mark Antony. Mark Antony had the eastern part of the empire. Augustus had the western half. And Mark Antony, of course, was quite happy with half of an empire because he had Cleopatra that he was hanging out with and having margaritas with on the Nile. And Augustus, while Antony was romancing Cleopatra, he was planning how he's going to take over the rest of the empire. And Augustus does that, and Herod the Great sided with the wrong guy. He sided with Mark Antony. Mark Antony gets defeated in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, and then what happens is Herod the Great has to write a letter to Caesar Augustus saying, I'm sorry, I didn't side with you, right? That could be the end of one's political and business career, but not for Herod. He says, I will be just as loyal a friend to you as I was doggone it to that Mark Antony. I'm just loyal to the very bitter end, you know? And then he builds these temples to win the favor and trust of the emperor, Caesar Augustus. So that's a key backdrop. Now, why do I say all that? Because it changed the entire way I understood what Peter said here. You are the Messiah, he says to Jesus, the Son of the living God. The dominant building in Caesarea Philippi is the temple dedicated to Caesar Augustus, who is worshipped as a god because of his claim to be Divus Filius, Son of God. And what is Peter saying? He doesn't simply say you're the Son of God. He says you're the Son of the living God. Do you see the importance of this word? It changes everything. Because basically what Peter's saying is you're not the son of some dead god like Augustus, like the Roman emperors. They are in a line who claim to be gods and descendants of gods, but those gods are dead. They're not living. You are the Son of the living God. You're the true Son of God, of the true God. Now, in the Old Testament, when living is used as a modifier for God, it's always in a context where Israel is contrasting the living God versus the idols, the pagan gods that are cast in stone and silver and gold, that have, as Isaiah will mock, mouths and ears and eyes, but they're blind and they're deaf and they can't eat because they're dead. They're not living. And so living is always in contradistinction in the Old Testament to idols. So for the Jews, living is what you do to talk about God versus the idols, the pagan gods that have no life. And guess what? This is the first and only time that Jesus is in a city with a pagan temple. This is the first and only time that Peter and the apostles with Jesus are in a place with a large pagan statue erected in honor of Caesar Augustus, who claims to be the Son of God. And before that building, in sight of that building, Peter says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And I would bet you that living had the emphatic emphasis here. You're the Son of the living God, as opposed to that statue of that man who's dead and his father who is dead and is a dead God. That changes the whole way you hear the story, doesn't it?
That's amazing.
That historical context makes the story come alive.